Hi everyone, and welcome to the Round 3 report from the Corus tournament 2010. There were 4 wins from Round 3 and all for the black pieces. The victors were Nakamura, Ivanchuk, Carlsen and Shirov against Short, Smeets, Vanwilli and Tiviakov respectively. Shirov is on fire with 3 wins from 3 games, and in this round he was awarded the prize for best game. So that's what I thought we'd have a look at here. Tiviakov is not hugely famous, but it's customary for the top Dutch players to partake in the Corus tournament, although he's Russian originally. His FIDE rating is 2664 anyway, so he's no amateur. And he had the white pieces here and opened with e4, to which Shirov answered c5, the Sicilian defense, and play continued with one of the many book lines, knight c3, knight c6, and now bishop b5, which is fairly unconventional, but Tiviakov is renowned for steering games into positions both that his opponent will be unfamiliar with and that he has studied at home in depth, because this provokes knight d4, threatening to win the bishop pair and resulting in a lost tempo for white after bishop c4. So now came e6, knight g e2 as opposed to knight f3. Playing the knight to e2 instead retains the mobility of the f-pawn, which is part of Tiviakov's middle game plan. And now came knight f6 and white castled. Shirov wouldn't have minded knight takes d4, because after c takes d4 and say for example knight b5, there's knight takes e4 and not enough compensation for the pawn for white. If knight takes d4, then knight takes f2, king takes f2, queen h4 check. Picks up the knight and gets the material back with a superior position. So, white castles, and now comes a6, preparing b5, which will generate initiative and win the bishop pair for black. After d3, it's b5, bishop b3, knight takes b3, and a takes b3. And it seems that Shirov has already refuted his opponent's home preparation. Fritz gives black an edge already in this position. Not only does he have the bishop pair, but also the initiative, and he's inflicted double pawns on his opponent too. So he's done very well out of the opening here, considering he's got the black pieces. He continued with the bishop b7, and now came f4, the continuation of Tiviakov's plan. The only thing he has going for him is slightly better development, but objectively speaking he's still worse, because he has no immediate way to exploit this lead in development. So d5 from Shirov, and now e5, wisely trying to keep things closed, because an open board would definitely favour the bishops here. However, Shirov has his own plan to open it up, with d4, which is effectively a pawn sacrifice to open both the center of the board for his bishops and the g-file for his rook. A very nice idea. After e takes f6, d takes c3, and f takes g7, forcing bishop takes g7, and now b takes c3. And white has won a pawn, but look at the scope of this bishop pair. It could be a diagram from a chess tutorial book explaining the power of the bishop pair. The light square bishop in particular is very strong, as white has no way to oppose it. And what's more, Shirov still has the initiative, and here he made his intentions clear with rook g8, jettisoning his kingside castling rights to get attacking chances already and keep the initiative going, because rook f2 is essentially forced here, and now Shirov has a nice combination to get the pawn back. If you want to try and spot it, then stop the video now. Bishop takes c3 is the move, and although this gives up the strong bishop pair, the resultant position will favor black. It's never a bad thing to trade one advantage in for another, and that's what Shirov did here. After knight takes c3, queen d4 wins the material back, because the knight is attacked, and at the same time black is threatening rook takes g2 check with mating threats, because the queen is pinning this rook here on f2, and this threat forces white to give up the knight. King f1's how Tiviakov chose to defend, so now queen takes c3, and again Shirov keeps the initiative due to the threat on the rook at a1, and the best way to save it is with the rook a2, because this threatens to trap the black queen with bishop b2, and after the queen moves c3, so Shirov is forced to move it, and d4 is a good central post. If bishop b2 now, then queen d5 keeps the queen aggressively posted in the center with good pressure. So queen h5 from Tiviakov, who's striving for activity and threatening to take on h7. Shirov, however, ignored this threat and pushed forward on the queen side with c4, gaining some space. B takes c4 is how Tiviakov answered the correct course of action. If instead queen takes h7, now comes rook h8, embarrassing the white queen because now she's got no squares to go to. Bishop e3 is the best that white can do, trying to deflect the queen from the defense of the rook here on h8, but now simply queen f6, and white can't hold on to his queen. The best he can hope for is queen takes h8, check, but after queen takes h8, of course, black is easily winning. So, b takes c4. Now b takes c4 and rook a4, pinning the c pawn and preventing black from winning a pawn with c takes d3, whilst threatening to take himself on c4 with either the rook or the pawn, probably the rook. So Shirov played bishop d5 to reinforce c4, and also f7, as white will clearly be playing f5 before long to try and crack a route into the black king, which is still in the center and should therefore be vulnerable, but Shirov has judged the position well and his king is safe where it is. After f5 he played e5, keeping things as close as possible, which is a wise idea given the vulnerable king, although Fritz gives white a slight edge now, because the point is that queen takes h7 is now possible because the queen trap is no longer playable because black has played e5. And Shirov was more than willing to sacrifice a pawn to keep his strong position, and Fritz confirms that he has good compensation even at this stage after king d7 in order to maintain his rook at g8, which was threatened by the queen. And this also connects his rooks. So now everything is solid, and the position itself is a great example of the fundamentals of chess. Every piece and pawn in the black camp is covered, and the pieces are on ideal squares. The queen and bishop especially are very nicely placed in the center, where pieces are always stronger. The g-file pressure also is strong, and white, on the other hand, has two loose pieces, his bishop and his rook, here, and there's a lack of harmony and coordination between his pieces overall. Fair enough, he's a pawn up, but material means little in comparison with piece coordination and harmonious play. Tiviakov was also getting into some time trouble by this stage, and at this point played an inferior move with queen h6. His idea presumably was to attack the isolated pawn here on a6 and try and generate some play, but a better continuation was f6, which would almost equalize for white overall in the position, according to Fritz. The move that Tiviakov did play, queen h6, is bad because it allows a nice tactical shot from Shirov, who's a master tactician. If you want to try and spot it, then stop the video now. Bishop takes g2 check is the move, and now black has a decisive advantage at almost a pawn and a half ahead, objectively speaking. Tiviakov didn't take the bishop and played instead king e1, which is preferable to taking the bishop, as that leads to a crushing attack for black. Let's have a look. If rook takes g2, now rook takes g2, king takes g2, rook g8 check, and black now has a winning attack. Aside from sacking his queen, white has two ways to avoid a quick mate. His best bet is bishop g5, the only other credible defense being king f3. But now would come e4 check, and with best play, d takes e4, queen d1 check, and black can force the king onto e3, which is the aim of this attack. After king f2, queen g1 check, king f3 is the only move that avoids mate, but now queen f1 check forces king e3, and now the killer, queen takes c1 check, king d4, queen takes h6, and it's game over. So after rook g8 check, bishop g5 is the better defense, But now comes queen g4 check, and black's winning back the material with a winning position after, say for example, king f2 and rook takes g5, where the threat of rook takes f5 check is so strong that white's best defense is to take the rook with his queen. Fritz gives an evaluation of -5 pawns for white, so it's game over. But anyway, back to the game continuation. After bishop takes g2 check came king e1. Okay, that's the end of part 1.